Hello and welcome back to the Move Me Brightly podcast. My name's Tom Bond, here as always with my co-host Blaine. How are you, Blaine?
Doing great. It's been a minute since we've been
Yep.
on air, and here we are, Thanksgiving Eve.
Scheduling, family, all that stuff, work, it happens.
Things happen.
We have an amazing guest today, Sarah Seligman, director, producer, activist, and my best friend in the world. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Blaine.
Hi.
How are you today?
Good. I'm doing well, thank you.
What's going on in your life?
Not much, end of year, end of the strike, trying to figure out schedule. You and I are producing things, and I might have to abandon you to fly out to the DR, and we don't know the details, so that's a little stressful.
It is. Yeah, Sarah and I are working on this anthology feature right now where we're producing 4 different segments. We've shot 2 so far. We have 2 more to go in the first 2 weeks of December. And Sarah's going to leave, definitely for the last one, but possibly both. That's what we're kind of waiting to hear. Sarah is working on a TV show as a director that shoots in the Dominican. She started in July, and I went down to visit her, and I got there the day the SAG strike started. So everything was kind of put on hold, and then we just basically had a vacation.
A vacation.
Yeah, because she wasn't working anymore. But yeah, so you're talking logistics because you might go back in December for some prep before you shoot in January. So that's all to be sorted, I guess.
Right. And I think for the industry, it was a little bit like a second pandemic, in the sense of like just the not knowing and the uncertainty and the unemployment and the waiting and the financial strain. So it was stressful for everyone. And yeah.
Yeah, I read online that some of the studios reported quarter losses that more than made up for what the actors were asking for in the first place. Like the amount of the amount in the red that they were, that dollar amount would have more than made up for everything that the actors wanted. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but it was the longest SAG strike in history, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was the writer's strike as well. So yeah, I mean, we were able to start shooting even though there was the writer's strike because the scripts existed, but then yeah, we had to stop shooting with the actors strike.
Yeah. There's no grandfathering in of projects when you're an actor.
No.
Which is good. But yeah, it seems like that's
Stop documentary work, or did documentarians have to stop?
No, because there's no Writers Guild writers usually, and there's no actors. So
I guess the only potential issue there would be if they had an actor doing like narrative voiceover for a documentary. Like they couldn't record any of that. But if they're interviewing some scientist, they're probably not. Unless they're Bill Nye the Science Guy, then they're not in SAG. He might be the only SAG scientist that we know of. But yeah, Sarah, we wanted to bring you on because you're very talented at what you do. You're a working filmmaker, which not a lot of people can say, a successful working filmmaker. And Sarah and I, for those listening who don't know, we met in 2007 in New York when we were both 21 years old, and met at the New York Film Academy, which was like this 1-year filmmaking workshop school, not like a 4-year like an NYU or USC or anything like that, but like a workshop basically that put all the gear in your hands and basically said, this is practically how you go about making a movie. So we learned how to do sound, cinematography, editing, directing, all of that stuff. And we met there. We were a class of 15 students that did everything together throughout the calendar year, basically January to December of 2007. And Sarah was by far the most talented person in our class. I've said this since 2007.
I disagree with that statement, but you're entitled to your opinion.
Of course you disagree. But Sarah was, it was clear from the start. We did like we each had to do 4 projects within the first like 6 to 8 weeks or something like that. And just the quality of her films. I so vividly remember the first project we had to do, and we were all handing in garbage. And Sarah screened her film, and we're like, oh, that's what like a movie's supposed to look like. Interesting. So obviously I hitched myself to her wagon because I knew she was going places, and manipulated my way into her heart so she would want to be my friend forever. And now we're here. And now she has 2 features that she's directed. She's obviously working on this big show in the Dominican, and we started a production company together called Broken Pig Productions. Shout out Broken Pig. That's basically like our producing arm. So we work a lot together as well as our very close friends. So I wanted to ask you, Sarah, because obviously I know your past, but not a lot of people listening do. What made you decide to get into filmmaking? Was it always something that you loved? Were there other things that you wanted to do instead and you kind of found your way into it later in life? What was that process like?
It was not something I always wanted. I don't think it was something I even considered a possibility growing up. We didn't have I don't know. We just didn't have a television in my house. My parents are not big into movies, so it just wasn't something very present. I mean, the not having a television and not going to the movies is pretty, a pretty big gap there. So it just, yeah, it wasn't something I thought about. I wanted to be a ballet dancer, and I worked towards that. And I went to professional ballet school. I went to the National Ballet School in Mexico, and then I got a scholarship and went to the National Ballet School, well, the Hamburg Ballettschule in Germany, the John Neumeier School. And I had a career-ending knee injury when I was 15. And yeah, like almost turning 16, and then that was it. So like when I moved back home when I was 16, I have no idea what I wanted to do, because I had spent the past 6 years since I was 10. My life was exclusively revolving around becoming a ballet dancer. And that meant, my only afternoon activity after school was ballet class or stretching or something like that. And suddenly there was like this big void, and depression, which I don't think anyone really knew to call it by its name because of the big void. And most kids that age don't know what they want, but it's weird if you've known what you wanted and then suddenly you can't have it. I think there's this big mentality of, follow your dreams. If you work really hard, you can achieve anything you put your mind to. And learning at 15 that that's a lie was really tough. No, you can't always achieve what you want. No, working hard enough is not enough. There's luck, there's talent, and I didn't have the natural abilities to become a ballet dancer. That's why my body eventually snapped. And I don't think I had the tools. I don't think my parents had the tools. I think society gives us the tools to admit that a dream and a desire is not enough, and that you can't will your way into everything. And that was a tough pill to swallow. And so my mom was trying to cheer me up and keep me busy, and she signed me up for acting classes after school. And I started doing it, and it was fun enough. And it became a job, and that was fun. It was fun to be 16 and making money from acting. And so, but once I was on set, I was definitely way more interested in what was happening behind the camera. And so I think that's where it started, just understanding production and storytelling and just really wanting to stay on set rather than going back to my dressing room. But I don't know why, but it still didn't become a thing I wanted. It was the thing I was the most interested in, but it didn't occur to me that I could pick that over acting. But also I wasn't picking acting as my career yet. I didn't really know at that point what I wanted. And I ended up moving to New York to go to an acting school, a 3-month course. Yeah, a 3-month course, acting school. And I moved there with a friend, Romina, and we ended up having so much fun that we decided to stay. But honestly, it wasn't about the acting. It was about the living alone in New York, 100%. But then eventually I was like, okay, I had saved money from the acting I had done in Mexico, and I couldn't just stay there forever not doing something. And it wasn't during an acting class that one of the teachers, basically the teachers direct you do scenes and the teachers direct you. And I thought the teacher did a terrible job. Like, the teacher was such a bad actor's director. It was 100% about the result and not about the inner life of the character or the things that I thought and I still think are more important. So she was more about like the cry, I want to see tears, and I'm more about like well, not everyone cries for the same reasons. Tears are not the same when they're out of anger or desperation or sadness or pain. Pain of loss is different than pain of heartbreak, than pain of disappointment, embarrassment. So like, I felt like she was losing all that intelligence in the actor, and the actor just became this prop that does the thing, the button you press. And that's when I thought in my head, I don't want to be an actor because I'm going to have to deal with bad directors, and I don't want to do that. And in a moment of cockiness, I decided I can do this better than her. And that's when I decided I wanted to be a director.
And that teacher's name was? Okay, no. So you kind of fell into it, because that you kind of answered it, but that was going to be my question. While you were acting in Mexico and you saw the process behind the camera, you were still in a mindset of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I don't think I want to pursue acting, but this stuff seems cool. Like,
right.
That's the extent of it.
Exactly. Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you an only child?
Yes.
Okay.
Why do you say no? We got to unpack this. Why'd you ask?
I mean, I have a couple of reasons for asking, but I think that oldest children and only children are pretty universally like, I can do this thing that I dream about, and I think sometimes like down the line, it's less likely that you'll be like, I truly believe I can do this thing if I really put my mind to it. I think it's kind of the trait of, maybe no.
The oldest and only kids.
Well, only kids, you have the full force of your parents behind you,
Ideally you do.
Yeah. Usually,
So,
I mean, yes.
yeah.
Yes. But like, for you to be 16 and your parents to have put everything together for you to get as far in ballet as you got. Just wondering.
Yeah, they didn't. I did it myself. They didn't pick the boarding school in Germany. They didn't want me to go to Germany. My mom really, really didn't want me to go to Germany. I found it out online. I told them, I sent in the video submission. I had to get the scholarship. I don't think they'll ever admit it, but I think part of the reason they have to let you, like my parents have to sign, obviously, because I'm underage, to do the audition. I think they thought I wouldn't get in. So I don't think they understood. And maybe you'll ask them, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but I think there was like a sliver of getting into the Hamburg Ballet Schule with a scholarship that year they accepted 2 people. So they probably thought, yeah, you want to try, we're not going to stand in your way. But between that and going, like, it wasn't stage parents in that sense. It wasn't their dream. They just didn't want to say no to my dream, but I had to get it myself if that's what I wanted.
You bring up your parents, so I kind of want to ask, because I obviously know your mom and your dad is a brilliant physicist. So not really involved. I mean, science is its own art form, of course, but not involved in like the conventional or modern arts in any real way. I know he's a Star Trek fan, but he was never in like the movie industry, the music industry, anything like that. Your mom, though, I know has a lot of artistic traits, has dabbled in acting and in theater in the past. Was there any growing up, like looking at what both of your parents were doing and either deciding you wanted to pursue one of those paths, or were you actively trying to like push away from either of those that never played a factor?
I did think at some point I wanted to study math. At one point, I did an internship in biology. And again, my parents were supportive, but they weren't like opening the path for me. I'm sure they would have loved, especially my dad, if I would have studied math or biology instead of ballet dancing or filmmaking.
I could see you studying biology and having like morbid fascinations with diseases and stuff.
I wanted to be a geneticist, and my internship was 3 months of 3 months is an exaggeration. Wait, no, what's summer break? It's like a month and a half or 2 months. They do a lot of genetic testing with fruit flies. There is very little rights activism for fruit flies. People don't really care about fruit fly rights. Their life cycle is pretty quick, so that helps for genetic studying, and they're cheap and small and easy to maintain. So when you assist geneticist at that level, basically what you're doing is making fruit fly food, which is like a apple juice jello type. And you put the fruit flies to sleep with a little bit of gas, and then you separate them, the male ones from the female ones, and then the virgin females from the non-virgin females. Not from a slut shaming perspective, but genetically you need them to be virgin so that there's accuracy in the testing. And it kind of took the joy out of what I thought genetics would be, to do that every day and kill a bunch of flies by accident.
We found the title of this episode, which is "We're Not Slut Shaming Fruit Flies." I think that's the title of this.
Perhaps your memoir.
Yeah.
My memoir.
Fruit flies only live for like 3 or 4 days, right?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it is a very quick life cycle, which is part of the reason why they were so good, because we could study like a genetic trait within a week. Like you have multi-generations to study, which without other animals you wouldn't.
I wonder if a female fruit fly at like 10 hours old starts getting like baby fever, like their biological clock starts ticking. Like I was born at sunrise, the sun setting. Like, when's this gonna happen? This is ridiculous. Okay, so you moved to New York. Don't look at me like that, Point. You moved to New York, you go to acting school, you have a blast with Romina, hanging out in Union Square, doing the New York single girl thing. And then you stumble upon New York Film Academy, which is where I met you. So you had that bad acting teacher. You decided, I can do this better than they can. Let me actually go pursue this. So you joined New York Film Academy in January 2007, which is where we met. Did that feeling towards filmmaking change during that year-long program? Like, did it turn into a love and a realization of like, oh, this is something I could see myself doing for the rest of my working life? Or did that not come until a little later? Or maybe it has never come?
I don't know if you know this, but I applied. So like, we started in January. So in that fall, I applied for the John Jay College of Criminal Justice because I wanted to study criminology. And the core school didn't start until September. So I was going to do film school until September and then go to college, to John Jay. So yes, it absolutely changed because I did not go to college after. So I just stayed in film. And with my stance now on the criminal justice system, I am so glad I didn't go to criminal justice school, or I would probably be a very, very unhappy person right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I said, being in school with you every day, I mean, we were in there, like, especially the first half of the year, like 6 days a week for like 10, 12 hours a day. Like it was a pretty intense schedule. And so we all got very close very quickly. And to me, having just met you, I would have never guessed that this was something you just decided to do like a few months earlier. Because I think I know, and I'm sure Blaine can attest to this too, with a lot of the people that we've met, some of them come into their careers later in life, even if they come into that career later on, like an earlier passion for that art form. So I think it's really interesting and a good perspective to hear from somebody who did not only didn't start that until their early 20s, but didn't even really develop like a love for it until that same time, until early adulthood. Because I think it's
I
no, go
did
ahead.
my first film with my cats when I was like 13 on my VHS. And in boarding school, we would make films. We made a horror movie, like edited on camera. I think I was
Well, there's some love.
I think I was the killer. So like I liked it, and I started in boarding school is when I started watching more movies because I had access to a TV. Yay.
Yeah, okay, so there was some like enjoyment
Right.
earlier. Yeah, got
Just
it.
what there was no no in my mind I couldn't like relate it as a job.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question, because you plan on going to this criminal law school, right? And you decide to make the decision not to. Did your parents know that you had applied to that school and were planning on going? So you
Yeah.
told them later in 2007, like, I'm just going to pursue this instead,
Yeah.
which is a big gamble. Like, I think career wise, plan wise, if you're a parent of a child and those are the two options that they present to the parents, they're going to say, like, do the law thing, please. Please
Yeah.
do the law thing. That's way more percentage wise. You have a way higher chance of building a successful career in life for yourself.
But at this point I was like, I'm gonna be a ballet dancer, which is not financially or like stability wise, it's not a great career. Like your
Unless
career,
you're in like the top.
even then, your career is over by the time you're 30,
Yeah.
35 tops. Then I'm like, okay, fine, I'm gonna study genetics. Just kidding. I'm gonna stick to acting. Okay, fine, math. Just kidding, still acting. Okay, criminal justice. Just kidding. So I think at that point they were just like, you have your savings. It's gonna run out, and when it runs out, you're gonna have to move back to Mexico, and you're gonna have to do the normal people career thing eventually, or you're going to figure it out. I think maybe at that point they figured I would figure something out because I had, I mean, when I looked into the boarding school, internet existed, but it wasn't like, in our phones and our pockets. It wasn't as readily available when we were 14. Actually, no, because I applied when I was 13. So like it was, I don't know, I think at that point they were like, and I had a
That was
catering.
back when you needed like an AOL disc.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a catering company while I was acting. I had I would do puppet shows for kids' birthday parties. So like they knew I was
You didn't know to that, Blaine. Hire Sarah for a puppet show for
yeah, I
Quinn.
had like my original story that I would tell, and I would like get hired from one party to the next. Like I was entrepreneurial, so I think they probably thought I would figure something out somehow.
Yeah, and I think that's the vibe most of us at NYFA, New York Film Academy, had about you too, was like, we don't know what you're going to end up doing, but whatever it is, like, I think we all thought you would be successful because you're incredibly hardworking and motivated when you, like, especially when you set your mind to something specific, then it's just like, okay, it's going to happen because Sarah's like on the prowl. She's gonna do what she's got to do to make it happen. And you are, like, I think that is a trait that I really admire in you, is like, you are the most prepared person when it comes to work stuff that I've probably ever met. Like, you work details down to like the very nitty gritty. And for those of you who don't know, Sarah always has this thing where she thinks she's woefully underprepared for stuff, which I think just makes you work even harder and get even more prepared, because you give yourself this anxiety attack of like, I'm not ready, but of course you are, you know. And I've noticed that even when we produce stuff together, is Sarah's like to the minute task, like organizing it, making spreadsheets, color coding it, doing all this shit. And I'm kind of like, it'll work out, it'll be fine, so don't worry about it too much.
Color coding and spreadsheets too.
I do.
Sarah, have you read Big Magic?
No, I have not.
Great book. Talk about it all the time. But it's written by Liz Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. But she tells a story in it about how she was looking for her next novel and didn't really know what it was going to be. And she had written one about like India and a crime that had happened in India, and then it didn't really work out. And she didn't have motivation for what her next book would be. So she said, well, what am I interested in? And couldn't really find an answer to that for a while. And then she was like, well, I guess I'm interested in gardening. And that was the only thing. She was like in a depressive kind of state. So she was like, well, I guess I'll garden. And then gardened, and then kind of got interested in different like species of flowers, and then wanted to know how they related to one another, and then would like go to the library and try to figure out the like genus or whatever of these specific flowers and how they related, and then the ancestors to their flowers. Meaning she just got like very into like plant origins, and then got so into it that she ended up writing a book called The Origin of All Things, that basically delves, like, you have to be an expert in that thing to create this fiction work that she created. But a lot of your stories kind of remind me, or a lot of the way you say you grew up remind me of that. And what I think is such a beautiful thing about being an artist and a creative person is sort of the permission that you can give yourself to be like, I'm really into like criminology, or maybe I'm into biology, or maybe I'm into math or whatever. And a lot of that is growing up. But I think there's also such a beauty in giving yourself that permission, and really leads to a nice, like, rounded way of just living, to have interest and then learn a lot about those interests.
Yeah.
I think keeps the streak alive of name dropping Eat, Pray, Love to 100% in these episodes as well.
It applies to everything. So see you next episode.
Okay, we're at film school. You do great. We're still living in New York. It's now 2008, and you start taking a lot of set jobs. I think initially, like me, right, you kind of started on the grip and electric side for a tiny bit, and then started getting production assistant roles on bigger projects like TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
And you used to work super long hours, tons and tons and tons of hours, and we're just grinding it out. You eventually moved to Los Angeles, and you get staffed on the Mindy project with Mindy Kaling, and you start as a production assistant. Were you an office PA at first? You were an office production assistant at first. So for those who don't know, a production assistant is basically like the grunt of a set. They do all the paperwork, order the lunches, block off people walking in and out of sets to make sure it's clear for camera, all that type of stuff. So Sarah starts out, and you start out in the office there for the Mindy project. You eventually move on to becoming a set PA. So now you're actually working on set with all the department heads, with the actors and stuff like that. And through your hard work, you eventually make your way all the way up to production supervisor for that project, right?
Yeah.
So now at this point, you have a pretty major title on a network TV show. You also did a couple other TV shows like around that time. But this whole time, you're very much focused on your own creative endeavors as well. Like, you just don't want to be helping facilitate other people's work. You want to make your own thing. And you were very driven at doing that. You had this idea for a feature film that was based off your thesis at New York Film Academy, which Sarah and I ended up writing together, called Coyote Lake. It was originally called Falcon Lake when we were writing it. I didn't know anybody in the industry. I think at this point, when we first started writing it, you were still in New York and doing the PA thing. And then you moved to LA while we were still working on it. But neither of us really had a ton of connections at this point. The script, to me anyway, seemed like a pipe dream, if I'm being honest. But I also, like, again, it goes back to, like, I just had trust in Sarah. I was like, if I'm working on something with Sarah, the likelihood of it happening is much higher than if I was working on it with like another friend who I went to film school with or something like that. I just felt something about her that would make it work. And then it eventually did. We won a few grants at festivals. We were able to meet studios and producers and all this stuff. It eventually gets financed, and it was shot in 2018 in Texas and released in 2019. And so from 2007, when you enter film school, to 2018, when you're on set as a director, that's an 11-year journey for you to get to that point. And you logged thousands of hours on set, in offices, doing menial labor, graduating to bigger and better positions. What was that feeling like when you finally walked onto the location that first day of the shoot for Coyote Lake?
I also thought it was just a dream. And it wasn't actually when I walked on the location. It was one day we were on set. We were shooting the scenes when the first guest gets drugged. Not the first guest, sorry. Like, not Charlie Weber, but the other character. When Camila brings the Jamaica juice and he passes out. And there was a moment we were waiting for a reset, and it suddenly hit me. When I stopped ballet dancing, I thought that I was looking for something that I enjoyed, but I thought that I would never again have that feeling that ballet gave me on stage, of just like utter fulfillment, magic, bliss, peace, like a moment of everything is perfect. I thought it would never happen in my life. I thought I could find something that I really enjoyed, but I didn't think that would happen. And that day on set, I felt it again for the first time since I was 15 years old.
Do you know what it was about that particular moment that made it click for you?
I think it just was a moment of silence. I think the difference between directing and ballet is that there are very few moments when you're directing when you're not getting pulled in many directions. When in any live performance, once the live performance starts, everyone leaves you alone. You know, like the director, the choreographer, everybody did what they did. Unless, I mean, I guess sometimes they go behind stage and do crazy stuff, but thinking about like just the normal process, once you're on stage and you're performing, that's it. And it's happened, like it happened after again, but it's just little moments where everything on set is quiet, when nobody's asking me any questions, or I'm myself, I'm not asking me any questions, like where there's a moment where nothing is needed of me. I've answered all the questions. Everyone knows what they're doing. and I'm just observing the thing happen in front of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, speaking specifically to your experience, like, so we were in school in 2007. The year before, in the fall, that movie Babel came out with, that was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, like Best Picture and all that stuff. And the one acting performance, I think it was the only one that was nominated for an Oscar, was the woman who plays the nanny that gets stranded in the desert, Adriana Barraza.
Adriana Barras.
Adriana Barraza. Was nominated for an Oscar the year we were at school together.
Yeah.
And I remember Sarah just talking about how much she loved her, loved that performance, thought she was incredible. So when we were developing the script, the movie Coyote Lake is about a mother and daughter who live on the border of Texas and Mexico. And they basically run like a bed and breakfast that they use to drug and kill their guests for money, because it's kind of a martial law town where the coyotes and drug runners have taken over. And Sarah said for years that her dream role for the mom was her. And I remember thinking, because I was on set as well, just as a writer and just to hang out, I remember being on set and having almost like a moment for you where I remember meeting you when we were both in film school and we didn't know anybody or anything. And now 11 years later, you're directing one of the biggest young actresses in Hollywood, Camila Mendes, and the person that was on your mind for almost an entire decade, when you had no way to access this person. You had no way to like reach out and meet her because you didn't know anybody. And now she is performing in a story that came out of your brain. I say we co-wrote it. It was Sarah's idea. And then I just helped her write the script. But this thing that came from nothing, and you, who in terms of the industry came from nothing, you had no family connections or anything like that. And now you're on set directing these two big people, including your dream cast. Like, I just so vividly remember sitting at Video Village one day and watching you talk to both of them and thinking like, this is fucking incredible. Like Sarah manifested this so hard. Like, and it wasn't like an overnight thing, which I think is kind of the misconception a lot of people get about artists, is like a director just shows up or a pop star just shows up one day. And it's like, where do they come from? They're huge now. But I know from knowing Sarah, like the years and years of work and crap that she dealt with. And we'll get to the burnout stuff, which is kind of the central thesis of this podcast later, because I know Sarah has experienced it from being around her so many times. But yeah, I just think it was so cool to see somebody like envision a goal and not just like have it happen to them, but actively work every single day for so many years to make that goal a reality. And like, not just like some version of the goal, but the actual goal was achieved. And like in that moment, I just remember being like having so much pride for you to be able to watch that. It was just a really special moment.
Thank you.
No question. That was just a little rant.
Thank you.
I want to kind of transition, because above directing, which, or not above, but in addition to directing, which I know directing has become very much a passion for you, and we'll kind of talk about that because of this. Inside the industry itself, you've done a lot of different jobs as well. You were an assistant for a major producer, one of the biggest producers in Hollywood, for a while. And you were an executive at Universal for a year. You were a vice president, right? Yeah, you were a vice president at Universal, one of the biggest studios in the world. You currently work as an advisor to, I think, the biggest production company in Spain as part of their United States branch, which you still do to this day. You've done so many different things. And I remember when you got the job at Universal, my thought was like, oh, okay, she's set, she's on the fast track. Like, my thought of Sarah eventually taking over Hollywood, like, that's now it's happening. Like, this is the first major step towards that. You're eventually going to run your studio or something like that. You have this amazing job that very few people ever get to. And I would say probably after 6 months. You stayed there for a year, but I would say around the 6 month mark, I remember you really having doubts about that because you missed directing. You missed the creative side. And I don't want to speak for you. I want you to chime in, obviously, but I feel like you were maybe worried that that job was taking too much time away from the thing you really wanted, which I think from an outsider's point of view is a massive gamble to take.
Right. I never have wanted to run a studio. It's not my dream, my goal. I'm not going to work towards it. So taking that job is, you know, part like there is a certain sense of financial security that when you don't have access to money from somewhere else, you need to have a steady job, and it helps. And to me, it was like I was ADing and producing and production supervising while working towards directing. And all of those jobs are amazing learning skills, and I really enjoy them, but they're extremely time consuming and do not allow for you to truly do both things. I was production supervising a pilot when we got greenlit for Coyote Lake. And my prep as a director got cut short because I was working on this other show. And I think that it hurt the project a little bit. I think ideally I could have been able, I mean, ideally we found out, we shot April and May, Coyote Lake.
Mm-hmm.
In February, it seemed like it could happen, but it wasn't until 3 weeks before principal photography that we fully knew that we would shoot the movie. And I had seen the locations for the first time 1 week before. As a first-time director, that was very little prep. And to do that prep while still having a full-time job, because production supervising is a full-time job, was stretching me really thin. And I think that I could have, and again, we go back to the thing where you say, I'm always super prepared. I would have liked to be more prepared. And I think I could have been. So when I took the job as an executive at Universal, which was not as a development executive, not even as a production executive, it was on the production services side, which is more like the running of the actual studio. I thought that was going to be a lot closer to a 9 to 5, and that would give me a lot of flexibility and time on the weekends and even in the evenings to work on my own creative things, because as a production supervisor, AD, or all the other positions we do, producer, it's more like 12 to 16 hours a day. So I thought, oh, a regular full-time job is a lot less, but it turned out to be a lot more hours. So it was never my intention to stop pursuing directing. It was after 6 months or so at that job that I realized that it was not giving me the time flexibility. A, the time flexibility I thought it would, and B, I hated the job. I really, really hate the job. And I was so burned out from hating it that when I got home, even if it had been 9 to 5, I was too uninspired to ever do anything creative. I liked some of my coworkers and I appreciate everything I learned, but it was definitely not the right fit. And yeah, for 18 months, 16 months, like not 2 full years, but longer than a year and a half. And eventually, I mean, it peaked because it was like the pandemic started. And for most people, the pandemic meant no work, which I must say I was very, very grateful to have a job and to still be paid and not laid off. But the type of responsibilities I got, I still believe should have not fallen under my scope, because they were a lot about like health and safety and getting back to work protocols. That's like it's a world pandemic. I was like, why am I deciding or making decisions or having an opinion on this? And it was pretty crazy, not only to like quit a steady, very well paid job to do directing, but quit during the pandemic. I put my notice in, I believe it was July. Yeah, beginning of July of 2020. So like still very much at the height of the pandemic, and everyone was like, just wait it out. And talking about burnout, I was like, I can't. Like my body is physically unable to continue this job with these people under these circumstances. And I'm so privileged that I don't have kids and I don't have like financial responsibilities outside of myself. And that when I got the job, the big pay bump, I didn't change anything about my life. Like I didn't move, I didn't buy a new car or anything. So I was able to save a ton of money, which gave me the freedom of quitting.
Yeah, now that you say that, I remember when the pandemic hit, your workload just exploded.
Yeah.
And it was like every day was a call or a visit of you just being completely out of gas.
Yeah. Like it went from me dreaming I was doing an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 to like working like 17, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah. So you quit that. And at this point, it's 3 years ago now. And you've kind of moved on, right? From like the production supervising, the TV show world. You've kind of moved on from that, I think.
I haven't been hired again. I would love to do that again.
Well, you're in one now, but in a different role, of course.
Right. But I would
So,
still love to production supervise or something.
yeah. And then at that point, you know, a little bit of time passes and you're hired to make another movie as a director.
Yes.
Which is kind of like still the dream for you. So I think, you know, not that it's easy to make one, but I think historically it's much harder to get a second than it is to make the first. So I think like that is very validating as a filmmaker, I would believe.
I believe that it wasn't, because the second one is harder than the first, which is crazy. But especially because people like, you want your second one to be the better version, right? More budget, equal. I mean, I wouldn't say better cast because my cast on the first one was amazing, but definitely better budget, better script, better circumstances. And I went ahead and did a made for TV Tubi movie that was silly AF.
It's
And,
so fun. It's so fun though.
Well, that's the thing. Like I was recommended not to do it from my reps because your second movie is supposed to be a step up. And I was like, I don't care. I want to be on set. I want to direct. 2020 was a drag. I need something positive in my life. And to me, being on set and directing is something positive. And I'm sorry if this doesn't fit the aesthetic of what a second movie should be. And I do not regret it one bit. It was so much fun.
So what was the difference like? Not necessarily in terms of that, but as a creative person, because Coyote Lake is something you really like worked so hard over for so many years. It was your idea, right? So you had that attachment to the story. This other movie, you're coming on more as a director for hire. The script has already been written. Obviously, rewrites happen, but it's not your story. It's not your idea. You obviously have a say in cast, but not as much as like, this is the person I want for this role, go find them, right? So you're coming in under certain creative limitations on your second movie, which is called Safe Word on Tubi. On Tubi now, go watch it.
They're
what
both
Coyote Lake is on Tubi too?
Watch Coyote Lake first and then Safe Word as an upper.
and then you'll watch the TV show next year that Sarah's directing. So what were the differences like for you as a director? Because I know for me, you know, I wrote Coyote Lake with you. I always thought I wanted to be a writer since I was a child. And for me, the experience of Coyote Lake as the writer or the co-writer of it, it was very like emotionally exhausting to see the movie get made, to see people put their own money in, have their own ideas, whatever. And I think that's partly why I made a somewhat of a transition over to producing, because I don't have that like intense connection to the stories. I'm coming on to other people's projects and I want to help them achieve their vision. Like that's my goal as a producer. But that also makes it much easier to like wash my hands of it when the thing's finished. And if it's great, that's awesome. I'll do whatever I can to make the situation as good as possible for the real creative people to succeed. But if it doesn't work out and the finished product isn't amazing, then it's also like, that's okay too. Like it's a bummer, but it's okay. So did that play a role between movie one and movie two for you at all?
I think on set, it doesn't play a role as much because the directing itself, I mean, some of the protocols and the fact that you're not the last word, but on Coyote Lake, it wasn't the case either, because once we got the financing, we signed, and I'm no longer like the ultimate decision maker. There's other people that get a say. So in production, there wasn't such a huge difference. I'm gonna pour my heart and soul into it regardless whether it's my project or not. But once I'm done, like you said, it's so much easier to move on. Like you were there when I read the review, Blaine, just so you know for reference, Variety destroyed me. Like the review of Coyote Lake from Variety did not destroy the movie. I mean, it did, but it destroyed me. It was so personal. It was like, just thinking about it, I get emotional. It was horrible. Reading, and Tom was sitting right next to me because they emailed me like, oh my God, the Variety review came out. And I even thought, like, why would they email me such a bad review? Like, I'm at dinner. Let me read it when I read it. There's no need for an email to be like, hey, read this person that not only thinks you're a terrible director and you directed a terrible movie, but that genuinely thinks you're a terrible person and you did a terrible thing by existing and bringing this movie into existence. Like, it was that bad. And the big difference between something that comes so deep from your soul that takes 10 years, that is like, because Coyote Lake is something like, if you watch it, you're like, it has nothing to do with me, but it is very personal. Like the mother-daughter relationship, a lot of the things I wrote about were very close to me. Safe Word, I did a rewrite. I added some stuff about relationships that I thought were interesting and important to me. But if someone writes a bad review about it, I could not care less. I had fun. I did the best I could with what I had. And it is what it is. I might also just be more mature, but I think it's in big part because it's work for hire. No, I'm not more mature. Yeah, probably not.
No.
But it is because it's a work for hire. Like a review, like I'll read bad reviews and be like, oh, okay, that's an interesting point of view. Or like, oh, they didn't get it. Whereas with Coyote Lake, like I still can't. It still rips me to pieces if someone hates it that much.
I will also say about that Variety review, that critic whose name I'm thankful I don't remember was an asshole. And it's not because he didn't like the movie. That's fine. People are not going to like the movie, but he was making personal degrading comments about parts of members of your cast too. Like he was just really, it was corny and childish. And
Yeah,
it was the worst review to be sent to you.
yeah. But if someone wrote the exact same review with the same level of unhinged, not movie related things about Safe Word, I would be okay with. Like I would have the ability to be like, okay, this person is not critiquing our movie. This person is in a bad mood, had a bad coffee, hasn't gotten fucked in a while. Like whatever it is, they're not doing well. Whereas with Coyote Lake, still to this day, I feel like a knot in my throat and my stomach falls down when I think about that review.
Well, thankfully you have the Camila Mendes army behind you because her fans all love it.
Yay.
And I've watched it like 15 times. So you make Safe Word, and then pretty quickly after, or maybe even during post, maybe you interview for this show, this TV show.
I interviewed in January of this year.
Okay, so like post was wrapping up on Safe Word.
We were done. We had delivered, but it had
Okay.
but
Okay,
yeah.
got it. So you interview for this Amazon show, MGM Plus Amazon show, with Chris Brancato as the showrunner, the guy who did Narcos, great show on Netflix, and Guillermo Navarro, who's probably best known for being Guillermo del Toro's director of photography on stuff like Pan's Labyrinth, which you won an Oscar for. So they interview you to come on board for this new show, the first season of this new show, which is going to be an 8-episode season. And they are considering you to direct 2 of the 8. So you would be one of 3 directors total on this big budget production. And you get it. I know because I know you, but what was that experience like? Because you talk about like going from the first movie to the second movie and you want it to kind of be a step up. And maybe Safe Word wasn't that, but this definitely is. Like, I know we don't have to get into specifics because I don't want to blow up spots, but I know like the budget for just one 50-minute episode for the shows you're directing blow either of the 2 features you've made out of the water, right?
Well, Safe Word, it might have not been the step up everyone dreamed of, but it still was more budget than Coyote Lake.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a step up, and I had fun. And I think it was so important to do it because then by the time I get this TV show, currently titled Hotel Cocaine, so I have experience working with a studio. So I mean, you know, it's fun. But wait, what was the question? How it felt?
How it felt when you actually got it, because I know, knowing you.
Yeah, I still don't believe it. Like now, I haven't finished shooting it. So it's a 20-day shoot and I only shot the first 5 days of my 20. And I'm worried that they're going to hire a different director for when we come back in January.
Even though there's flying you out in like 2 weeks.
I don't have a flight. Why are they not responding? Why don't I know a date yet? Oh, it must be because they're looking for a different director.
This is the Sara process, by the way, for everyone
Sure.
listening. This is just the thing, is she downplays it and hyper neurotic, especially about career stuff. And then it always ends up working out. That's kind of like the runaround that's been happening for years and years and
Not
years.
always, but yes, the imposter syndrome is real.
Yeah. But you get this job, and it's a major job. Like,
Yeah.
you're working on a big budget television show by the guy who has already made at least 1 hit TV show. He also did Godfather in Harlem, right?
Yeah.
Which is currently running and is doing very well. But yeah, like Narcos turned into a franchise. It was super successful. He was one of the brainchilds of that. This is his next big project. So there's obviously a lot of attention and excitement for it. And you're one of 3 directors, 2 besides the main showrunner, Guillermo. You're basically one of 2 hired directors to work on this project. Now, I know when you were interviewing for it and they were considering you for it, you really didn't think it was a possibility. You thought like, I'm too inexperienced, or I don't have TV show experience, or whatever. I haven't worked with this type of budget before. You end up getting it. How was there any sense of like either feeling like I'm finally like really now going to be a full-time working director, or finally like my work as a director has been fully validated because I've been given this major opportunity and this major step up as a director? Did anything like that go through your head?
I'm still like, it hasn't sunk in. I feel like until I'm done, edited, delivered, and finished the job and didn't get fired in the process, it still is not a thing that my brain is absorbing fully.
So basically until you're on the couch streaming the episode and you see your name pop up in the credit.
Maybe. We'll see.
Question. Once you're done, edited, delivered, all of that, do you experience any kind of like depression once the actual thing is over? I was texting with one of my really good friends who's a musician, like insanely talented musician. We were talking this week and she was talking about just like when she wraps an album or wraps a tour or whatever, just the kind of massive depression that comes just from finishing something that's taken so much work. And I said, I mean, this is just classic Blaine on the podcast, but I said, I had this dream of having my own solo show at a gallery since I was like, knew what an art gallery was, and finally got that in 2019. And then after it was over, I was just massively depressed. And there was like no kind of next thing that could really get me out of it. I was like, what is going on? Like, you got the thing that you always wanted. Anyway, there's a Van Morrison song that I really love. And there's a line in it that says, you have everything in the world you ever wanted. And right about now, you face your worst mind, which I feel like is such a universal feeling, especially among artists, of just like, man, that's a big letdown. Anyway, I said that to her and she was like, holy shit. No, like exactly. That's the thing. Just
It is. It is. We want to have the feeling and then the feeling goes away. Like, we don't want to just have it and then it's done. It's like that feeling. You want it.
Yeah.
You want to direct. You want to sing. You want to have a show. You don't want to have had a show. I mean, that's cool and all, but you want to have the show. You want to do the thing. It is a little less depressing when it's not your baby. So like when I was done with Safe Word, there is like a sense of withdrawal for sure. Like the adrenaline is gone, all like you go from being super busy and creating to not. But it's a little less. So I'm hoping it's not as horrible when it's not my thing. But I mean, it definitely, because what we're seeking is the directing, not, I mean, at least me, it's like, sure, I want to make something that gets aired and that people watch and that people enjoy. But what I really want to do is direct. And so for me, it's like the being on set or the post-production, the watching the cuts and watching what I directed come together and it working or not working. Like, because we were interrupted, I shot 2 kind of like half scenes on the last day before the strike because of the limitations. And I asked them if I could see the cut to see if I needed to do any pickups when we go back in January. And like watching the scenes cut, and it's a super rough cut. I was like, yeah, like that fun, that part, yeah, you're gonna miss that. Of course, I'm gonna be depressed when we're done. And that's why it becomes so obsessive to want the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. It's tough when you depend on others to get those highs.
You bring up like the high of directing. Has it changed over time, or do you still feel just as excited when you're walking onto set as you did when you were making short films or when you were doing Coyote Lake? Like being in the Dominican, where I was down there, not during actual production because the strike hit, but like your team basically rented out like a quarter mile of beach and it was all dedicated to this show. And obviously, like, you're walking onto the biggest set of your life as a director, at least. Did you still have the same excitement as like your first day on your first feature, or has that kind of like evolved and changed a bit? What does it feel like for you now?
I would say it's the same, but with a little bit more experience as of what I don't want, which makes me more nervous. Like there are things, and I think you saw that change a lot, Tom, where like initially when we were in film school and even my first few shorts, like to me, it was about the result. I was so result oriented. I wanted the best film and I wanted to success. I wanted to succeed. So I wanted success. And I just did not give a fuck. And then things happened and it just, I realized that that's not the type of person I want to be, like in the sense that I care a lot about the movie and the result, but I care more about the people. And like I'm the way I push the crew and how far I'm willing to push the crew and how much I'm willing to put the project above the crew has completely flipped. And so every time I do a project, like those things change. And so I go in with the excitement, but also like the nerves of like my new goals. Like I think I've made it harder because I still want to deliver an amazing project, but it's so important to me that my crew is happy, that my crew feels heard, that my crew feels respected. And it's sometimes hard to balance because there's obviously the me part where I need to make sure that the stress doesn't get the best of me when we're not making our day or I'm not getting the shot I wanted, and being smart about pivoting. But then there's also other people on set. And I'm supposed to be on a certain level the leader. It's like if someone else is being disruptive with their behavior, what do I do with that? And also, what do I do with that in an industry that historically permits that type of behavior and I'm the newbie? So it's like, how do I handle it without it becoming a no hire stamp on myself? But also, does it matter? Do I care more about my principles than getting hired again? But also, I want to make a change in the industry. So if I don't get hired again, how am I going to make a change? So I walk on set with all of that in my head. So a lot of pressure and nerves and imposter syndrome, but a lot of excitement.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think when you ask yourself that question, knowing you would become a no hire if it meant standing up for them. You're not going to let shit slide.
Which I've done, and I think I need to find the middle ground. Because it's not necessarily the best solution, but you know, like how do you stand up to people in a way where you don't become a no hire? And not so much because I don't want to become a no hire, but because there's still a shoot, there's still a movie or a TV show that needs to be done. And I feel like when someone is behaving inappropriately on set, which is usually just like being a jerk, if it's like inappropriately in a different way, then I wouldn't care and I would set everything on fire to make it stop. But if it's just like, you know, someone being a little rude or a little disrespectful, but they're historically allowed because of their position, it's a little more nuisance and harder to manage because you want to stop that behavior, but you don't want to make it worse. And you don't want to create an even more hostile work environment. And I think the first time when that happened, the way I handled it created more drama than necessary.
What if someone is too jokey on set?
Like you?
Yeah.
I just tell you to leave my set and it's fine.
Sarah kicks me off the set like every production we produce together.
We're like trying to make the day and he shows up to make jokes. He's been at the computer offset the entire time. He's like, yeah, so what's going on, guys? And I'm like, yeah, not right now. Thank you. Go back to your office. Bye.
Okay, so we want to wind this down, but the central idea of this podcast is creative people who have a love for something creative. They turn it into their career and any potential burnout that comes with that decision. So I know, again, knowing you, you have definitely dealt with a lot of burnout in your life. I remember you working as a PA, coming over to my place after like a 14-hour day and just passing out on the floor before you can even sit on the couch. Like you would just collapse and pass out. You mentioned the executive job at Universal. Obviously post directing projects, there's that mix of depression and exhaustion. What has burnout been for you, specifically related to this career path? And when that happens, have you learned any tools through experience to try to like combat that or deal with that?
I feel like burnout to me has been my 30s. Ever since we did Coyote Lake, I feel burned out. Like constantly. And then when I get hired to direct, I get a little, or usually when I'm on set, I get like a little like of whatever that hormone is that gives me, like, you know, all the excitement of being on set. But I just feel like all of that stamina, and I like to call it stubbornness, where I would just like go for it. Like, I mean, when we were in our 20s, while I was PAing, I wrote Sweet and Spicy, which was like a really bad web series, but still, like, I wrote a 10-episode web series. I produced it. We shot it for very little money. I edited it. I like got a degree in business and economics while PAing 12-hour days. I wrote and basically got Coyote Lake financed. I made so many shorts. I don't have that anymore. I just don't have it. And I don't know if it's only burnout and I'm just stuck in burnout, or if it's like the health issues I've been having that are just like taking so much energy off. And the hardest thing is just admitting to myself that I just don't have that level of, is it passion? Is it energy, obsessiveness, stubbornness, whatever it is? I just don't have it anymore.
Well, I don't think it's passion, because like you said, when you get hired to direct something like this TV show, I see a difference in you. But like, I think even just acknowledging that you can't do what you used to do when younger is a tool to combat that. And I know we can speak specifically on this because this just happened. Sarah, as well as being a producer and a director, is also a fantastic AD, which is called an assistant director, who is basically the person on set who works closest with the director and the director of photography and basically manages the schedule of the day. Like, we're going to go to this scene, we expect it to take this long. So if we're running late or behind on something, that's the person who's like, we got to catch up, or goes to the director and be like, you have to start making cuts to make the rest of your day. All this stuff. They're basically like the calendar of the project. And Sarah historically loved doing that. You're a very organized person. You love the structure. You used to get very excited as an AT, and we're producing these projects for this show called Ramadan America. And normally when Sarah and I come on to produce stuff that's of a bit of a lower budget, Sarah will always AD as well as produce. So traditionally how we work together is we both handle different responsibilities on set, or I'm sorry, before we get to set. I handle more of like vendors, filling out the crew positions, handling all the paperwork stuff. Sarah handles more the scheduling, working with the DP, working with the director, getting everything organized. And then when we're on set, Sarah's on set 24/7, working constantly with the DP, very much involved with the actual filmmaking process. And I'm more behind the scenes, filling out contracts, hanging out, whatever.
On set and being disruptive.
But so that's something you always loved. And it was a benefit to us as a producing team, because that was a crew fee that we could basically just waive. And it was a big selling point for us as producers. But we've been on these projects, and you told me recently that you think you're kind of losing your passion for ADing a little bit. And I think, to me, like, it's a little sad, because I think you're a great AD, but I also think it's great that you're able to acknowledge that and not just like continue to suffer through it for 5 more years or 10 more years if you really don't like it anymore. You know, I think that's like, that's a skill set as well to deal with burnout of like, this isn't doing what it used to do for me. And things just change. People evolve. What interests you evolve. What you're passionate about evolves. And like recognizing that and being able to take a step back because it isn't doing for you what it used to do, I think is a good skill as well.
Yeah.
You know? And obviously watching Friends and Gilmore Girls.
See, that doesn't do it for me anymore.
Oof, okay. We're gonna have to talk offline about this then.
Yeah.
Something's going on.
No, I mean, I think I still love Friends, and I think I will always love Friends and Gilmore Girls, but I think that there was like this huge disconnect of my understanding of race, being white and also being a white Mexican, where the Black community in Mexico is completely ignored and does not have a voice whatsoever, more than even here. And like, you know, the awareness I've gained, and I continue hopefully to gain and to learn and to unlearn, makes it hard to watch some shows that used to be feel good and that now you're like,
That's true. Actually, those are two of your early favorite shows ever. And those are probably the two whitest shows in the history of television.
yeah. And even like now that I'm so aware about my, yes, as a white Mexican, I am completely full of privilege, but still I'm a Latina. And so I see that and I'm like, so much more painfully aware of the complete lack of representation, the racism in those shows, the ignorance on those shows, even just like the LGBTQ plus community problematic aspects. So I almost don't watch them anymore just because the memory of them is still so good that I don't want to watch them and get disappointed.
We watch Survivor instead. There's a lot more diversity in that.
Yeah, and also a lot of problematic behavior, but see, I'm not protecting it. Like Friends and Gilmore Girls, like my heart still wants to protect it, the memory and the good times I had with these shows, because they helped me through some really tough times. Whereas Survivor, I'm like, yeah, I'll judge you and I'll tell you Probst that you're being completely sexist and I don't care.
Jeff Probst is kind of sexist.
Yeah. And sometimes so problematic with racism and with I don't know, with LGBTQ, maybe not.
He's also like, he'll have a random tribal council where he actually comes off as very progressive too.
I mean, just the fact that it's called tribal council.
Yeah, we've talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love Survivor, but the entire appropriation of the native cultures in general, and then specific to whatever island they're going, like their immunity idols and all of those things, is insanely problematic. But you know,
I mean, the earlier seasons, remember they used to do challenges where like they would all wear like face paint, like war paint stuff. And then there was one season, Blaine. Do you watch Survivor? We've talked about this. There was one season that was separate. They separated the tribes by race. You had an Asian tribe, an African American tribe, a white tribe, and a Latino tribe.
It's really wild that
races, right?
like that happened.
What did you say, Sarah?
Didn't they call it War of Races or something?
No, we called it Race War, but it wasn't called Race War.
Okay.
But we nicknamed it Survivor Race War. It actually ended up being one of the best seasons.
Oh
and
my
I
God.
feel like,
but
what?
They make some like really problematic and they do. They like, it's super racist at times when like I can't even.
But that, I will say, not that we need to harp on Survivor too much, but that season, it's one of the earlier seasons. Survivor's been on for 45, 46 seasons now. This was like in the first 15 or so. But that season, I do think, was very beneficial overall to Survivor because it was a lot whiter in the early seasons. And they brought that season together and it ended up being one of their best, most competitive, engaging seasons ever. And I feel like Survivor realized like, oh, we really got to open up the like the different cultures and demographics on the show, because it just selfishly for them, it makes for much more interesting television.
I also do think white people, Anglo whites, are much more willing to put themselves in such stupid situation as Survivor. Like, I love watching it, but you could not, like, 1 million is not enough. And that's if you paid me 1 million to go, not the chance.
Not that you have to win it. Yeah.
Win it, 1 million. It's like, to put myself in that situation, no.
I think
No.
everybody gets 10 grand. And then the top 4, there's a pay bump.
Yeah, no.
I would do it. Honestly, I would do it just to go on a crash diet. I see a lot of those fat guys who go to the island, and by the end of it, I'm like, damn, they look good.
You're so white. It fits your perception of the world and lack of survival skills, I think.
I would leave after one day of just not being able to like sleep under a roof.
Or in something.
Maybe like a mosquito, you know, you get bitten by a couple of mosquitoes, you had to leave.
Blaine, there's been some gnarly shit on that show. We haven't gotten to this season yet, but there's an episode where a parasite crawls into a girl's ear.
Oh, shut up.
And it's inside her for 4 days.
Oh.
And she goes crazy because she's like, I can hear it in my brain. Something is wrong with me. And everyone thinks she's crazy. And then the camera actually gets it. She's like lying, taking a nap or something. And you just see this thing climb out of her ear. And then she's like, it stopped, but it lasted for 4 days.
See, like, that's some white people shit.
There was another guy who
white, no.
There was another guy who almost died on there because he couldn't go to the bathroom for like 4 days and his stomach was in so much pain. It was I don't think it was Yao Man, but it was someone else. And they airlifted him out and they had to do emergency surgery, and they were like, another 12 hours and he would have died on that island.
Yeah, no.
Great entertainment.
Great entertainment.
I gotta get into this.
You really should. It's so good.
Oh,
so good.
Guys, I gotta wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up.
Gotta wrap it up. It's Jimmy's birthday. So, you know.
Happy birthday, Jimmy.
We're going to see a Dead cover band. This is very important stuff.
Which band?
I don't know.
Who knows? Who cares? Yeah. Tell Jimmy happy birthday for us.
Yes,
I will.
And Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you.
I think it was very informative, and it's nice to hear from somebody who manifests their dreams the way you do.
Okay.
All right.
That wasn't nice? I thought that was nice.
That was so nice. Thank you,
Okay.
Tom.
Okay.
Thank you for
Happy
being part of my
Thanksgiving.
journey.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. Well, this will come out Monday, but I hope everyone's eating leftovers.